The abduction of Lyanna Stark by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen would set off a chain reaction that would result in the downfall of House Targaryen. Why the Crown Prince chose to kidnap Lyanna has been a question that has puzzled historians in its wake, and is likely to be a fierce subject of debate for decades to come. The obvious answer that most often accept is quite simple. Given the events at the tourney at Harrenhal, with Rhaegar unexpectedly crowning Lyanna as his Queen of Love and Beauty, the idea that Rhaegar was in love with Lyanna Stark is not a huge leap in logic. But the issue with this assumption is we have no record or source that suggests the pair shared a single word or interaction other than Rhaegar's crowning of her at Harrenhal. But the truth is, we can only ever know so much of what happens in the tents, dark halls and the thick woods that make up Harrenhal. How could we ever really know if a word was shared between Rhaegar and Lyanna? Regardless of motivation or intent, the event itself was already enough to light the tinder pile that was Westeros under King Aerys II Targaryen. Some less informed would question why Lyanna was anywhere near Harrenhal, but it would seem likely that she had travelled as part of her eldest brother's upcoming wedding. However, the exact circumstances as to why Lyanna was anywhere specifically near Harrenhal is another question altogether, and one that's unanswerable. News of the abduction spread like wildfire and found the ears of Lyanna's eldest brother, the hot-headed Brandon Stark, known as the Wild Wolf, who was 20 years of age at the time. Brandon and his entourage were en route to Riverrun to his wedding with the eldest daughter of Lord House Targaryen, who was 17 years of age. This marriage pact between House Stark and House Tully was poised to be a powerful one, especially when you consider the other pacts agreed between House Tully and Arryn, as well as House Stark and Baratheon, creating a powerful quartet of alliances. A dangerous alliance for House Targaryen and King Aerys II, who may well have been right to be suspicious of his lords. Brandon was outraged at the abduction of his sister, and would prove to live up to his nickname, the Wild Wolf. He would forego stopping at Riverrun and head straight for King's Landing with his companions, Ethan Glover, Albert Arryn, nephew to Lord Jon Arryn, and the heir to the Eyrie, Carl Royce, and Geoffrey Mallister. As the party rode with haste for the Red Keep, they did so assuming Prince Rhaegar would have fled there with his captive. Little did the Wild Wolf know this would be his undoing. As they stood outside the walls of the Red Keep, Brandon shouted for Prince Rhaegar to face him, return his sister, and come out to die. While Brandon's words never reached the ears of Prince Rhaegar, whose location was known only by a handful of people, they did reach the ears of the Mad King, sat upon his throne. King Aerys II had them all arrested for plotting the murder of the Crown Prince, and summoned all of their fathers to court to answer their son's treason. King Aerys II had been mad and paranoid for years by this point. His nature was widely known. Brandon Stark, if he had kept a calmer head, surely would have known this course of action would only ever end in doom. But alas, the Wild Wolf was indeed wild, and provoked the rage of the mad dragon. Like his son, Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell had been on his way south with the wedding party for Brandon's wedding to Catelyn Tully, when Aerys II's demand for his presence in King's Landing to answer for his son's crimes reached him. Rickard made for the Red Keep, along with 200 of his own men as escort. None of them would ever see the North again, as in King's Landing, all who stood accused were executed to the delight of King Aerys II, with the sole exception of one person, Ethan Glover. Why Ethan was spared is another mystery we will never know the answer to. Some speculate he gave up key information to Aerys that he had knowledge of as a bargain for his life, perhaps the identity of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, or information regarding Prince Rhaegar, but all this really is just baseless speculation. Why was Ethan spared? We don't know. We won't ever know. But Ethan Glover certainly would have a role to play in the events to come. Many lords across the realm, even if they did not publicly say so, were horrified at the mass death ordered by King Aerys. For many, this even being the last straw in terms of their loyalties. While the fate of the Northmen seemed very brutal with no sense of justice or honour, but King Aerys II, even in his madness, did allow for trials. Trials of a sort, but trials with no honour or dignity, only brutal punishment. Lord Rickard, as is his right, demanded trial by combat, and as most would have expected, Aerys allowed for Rickard's request. Rickard dressed for battle and readied himself to face his opponent. Many believed that Aerys would call on a member of the Kingsguard to fight for the crown, as normally would have been expected and would have been done, but Aerys had a sting in the tail. While fighting a member of the Kingsguard would have been a challenge for Rickard to say the least, a man with no reputation for skill at arms, it would have at least been honourable and a fair trial. What Aerys had in mind was very much not. The Mad King declared fire to be the champion of House Targaryen as the throne room fell silent with confusion. Even as Aerys had Lord Rickard suspended from the rafters of the throne room, it had not yet dawned on many the intentions of the king. That is until Wisdom Rosard and the pyromancers of the Alchemist Guild entered. They kindled a blaze underneath the Lord of Winterfell. Brandon Stark was too brought into the throne room and placed in a special Tyroshi strangling device with a longsword placed just outside of his reach. Brandon was told he could try and free his father from his fiery fate, but the more Brandon struggled to reach the sword, the tighter the cord round his neck became. Those in the throne room looked on in horror as events played out, but none found the courage to intervene out of fear of sharing the fate of Rickard and Brandon. Brandon was strangled to death, attempting to reach the sword to save his father. Lord Rickard perhaps had a worse fate, being cooked alive slowly in his armour as the wildfire below raged. There are many mistakes and errors made that made Robert's rebellion inevitable. There are countless points that could have been points of no return. There are some that argue that even with the kidnap of Lyanna Stark by Prince Rhaegar, there still may have been a peaceful solution. But what is now called the murder of Lord Rickard and Brandon Stark and the other Northmen ensured no peaceful outcome was likely. But the Mad King would still go one step further and put the final nail in his coffin. He sent a raven to the Vale of Arryn to Lord Jon Arryn with orders to send him the heads of Lord Robert Baratheon of Storm's End, Lyanna's betrothed, and the now Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell after the deaths of his father and brother. The young lords had been wards of Jon Arryn for several years, with Aerys severely underestimating his position. Rather than meet the Mad King's demand, Lord Arryn instead raised his banners in revolt against the Mad King and House Targaryen, in turn setting off a chain of alliances. This single act of defiance is where many mark the start of what would become Robert's Rebellion.